So let me introduce our panel leader, Shana Southward-Dobbs. She is a doctoral candidate in psychology, and she works in our CLEAR office and is a mentor for the GSTEP program, which she will tell you about in a little bit. But right now, she's going to facilitate this panel of your colleagues. I think most of these folks have been in your situation at one point or another, and I think they have some good insights for you. So Shana, if you'd introduce the panel and take it away.
Absolutely. Oh, thank you so much. That's very kind of you. So I'm Shana, and I'm so excited to spend some time with you this morning. I got to meet many of you at registration this morning. And I'm really excited for you to get to spend some time with these fine folks as well. Everyone on this panel has served in a teaching fellow role, also teaching assistant role for many of us, and then also research assistant roles and other roles on campus. So just like you, we've played, the game and tried to figure out the balance, the juggling act that we do as graduate students. So I'll actually ask each panelist to introduce him or herself, just very briefly, to let you know what department they're from and what roles they've served here at UNT. Joey, get us started.
Thanks. My name is Joey Tuminello, and I'm a teaching fellow and doctoral candidate in the Department of Philosophy and Religion.
Good morning. My name is Sarah Ferguson. I'll just talk really loud. My name is Sarah Ferguson. I'm a doctoral candidate and teaching fellow in the Educational Psychology Department. I'm specialized in research, measurement, and statistics.
My name is Alan Chu. I'm a third-year PhD student in educational psychology with concentration in sport pedagogy. And I've been a TA, TF, and RA as well.
And I'm Ben Gross. I'm a PhD candidate in the Department of Political Science, and I've been a TF and an RA here at the University of North Texas.
Right. So, and for most of us, we've had, by this point, multiple semesters in the teaching fellow role. So we've kind of made our, worked our way from TA for a while and then in the TF role. And what we'd like to talk with you this morning is sort of some lessons learned, things we learned down the road, and kind of the idea is what I wish I had known when I was getting started, which is where most of you are right now. But let's do this first. Everybody raise your right hand and repeat after me. I state your name. Okay, you're supposed to say your name right there. Will not freak out.
Do not freak out.
If I hear one of these panelists discuss something that is unfamiliar to me, I will find a person in my department whom I trust to ask some questions about it. Okay, thank you very much. So we spent some time talking with each other, and we kind of made a list, a master list, and then we narrowed it down of the big things, okay, that we thought you would probably want to know about. So the first big thing that was on our minds when we were early in our roles as TAs and TFs was the logistics of being in an instructional role. All the little tasks, the big tasks, where do I find my role, my roster? Who is in my class? How do I figure that out? And so I'm going to ask specifically Sarah and Alan to share a little bit about their experiences with that, but all of the panelists are going to jump in if they have a comment for that. So tell us a little bit about your experiences and your advice about dealing with just the logistics and the administrative tasks of running a class.
Okay, I'll start if that's all right. So when I first started as a teaching assistant, was actually my first role here at the university, and then I moved into teaching fellow, and I've been doing that for a couple of years. And the logistics differ a little bit between those two roles. So be aware of the fact that exactly what's required of you in terms of logistics is going to be slightly different depending on which role you're taking on. As a teaching fellow, there's some kind of housekeeping things you have to do. There's these things called audit roles. There's these things called grade rosters, these odd little things that exist. And it was one of those things that I wish that I had known kind of thing, but I did know, and I just didn't know I knew it. So if you have this document that they've given you, it has your agenda on one side, and then the resources are on the back. All the way down at the bottom, there's this thing that says, "And Teaching Excellence Handbook." Okay. Yeah, read that. They gave that to us at the Teaching Excellence seminar I went to, and you kind of skim it real quick, and then you get back to preparing for class. That was a big mistake. Don't do that. I think it's chapter 2 in there that really goes through those logistics kinds of things like audit roles and class rosters and grade rosters, and all of that's actually in there. And you'll get emails and reminders about it, but it will benefit you a lot to just take a minute and read the silly thing. It has a lot of these logistical details in there that I just didn't pay attention to, and then that came back later as a problem. If you're a TA, this is additionally helpful information for you to have, but it's not your responsibility to turn in the grade rosters and to turn in the audit rolls, right? For the TAs specifically, I would say you need to go talk to your professor, whoever your instructor of record is for that class, and have a really frank conversation about what is my job. What do you want me doing as a TA for this class? Do you need me to show up for every class? Do you want me to only be there once a week? Or do I need to log in every day to the online section? Am I responsible for grading everything, or am I only grading discussion boards? That conversation needs to happen. That will avoid a lot of confusion or things getting missed later down the line if you just go ahead and do that now. And they expect that, so it's not like you're asking them to do something unusual. But sometimes that conversation has to be started by us. Sometimes that will make your life a little better. So the resources that are on this document here are absolutely helpful. Keep this. Even if you just shove it in your desk, you never know when you might need some of these. And if we go down the list of what all of these are for right now, it's not going to help you. But just have these for later, for those situations where you do need them, and then you have access to them quickly. Yeah, I think those are my 2 things.
And I believe we will be sending the Teaching Excellence Handbook to you electronically, is that correct? After this event today. So watch for that in your email inbox.
And read it.
And read it. Thanks, Sarah.
So basically, say everything I can say already, but I would like to elaborate a little bit about, starting a conversation. So make sure who you can ask for advice. I would say at least identify 2 people. One is a coordinator of TF or TA in your department. So go to her, ask specifically about what you have to do throughout the semester. So not just first 1-2 weeks or 3 weeks, because even though I had orientation in my department, I did not know everything for the schedule at the first time. So actually I'm a little bit different from what they teach. I taught tennis in my department. It's like a physical activity class, but we still have exams and things like that. I did not know that in the middle of the semester, I have to turn in my final exam copy already in the middle of the semester. So if I have not asked the coordinator, I would not have known that. So that's something that you have to be cautious. Make sure you understand the schedule throughout the whole semester, and all the roles when you have to do it, and then grading and things like that. And I would suggest as a TA, try to learn every aspect of teaching. When you're a TA, learn from your professor. Understand, always ask her or him about what they do and how they do things on Blackboard, how they design their course, so that when maybe one day you have to teach that course, or one day, you're gonna be a TF position, you are going to be more familiar with what you do. That's what I did. First semester I was TA, and then I was TF the 3rd semester I was here. And then the second person you want to identify is a more senior student. So when I was first year PhD student, I would ask people who have been here for 2 years, 3 years, ask them about what they had to do, how they prepare for their class, and all the things that Sarah asked about logistics. Because sometimes faculty would miss what a student had to do, like what a TA or TF had to do, because the coordinator role is a little bit different than what we actually need to know. We have to maybe communicate with other staff in the department as well. So that's something I would suggest you to identify 2 people. One is coordinator of the TF or TA, and then second is one of your senior fellows.
Thanks, guys. I'm going to move us along because we have some other topics we want to be sure to discuss with you today. The next topic is how to calibrate your expectations of your students' performance. So some of you have been graduate students for a while now, but you're new in your instructional role, and the work that you've been doing is at the graduate level. You've immersed yourself in this deep exploration of your topic, your discipline, but that's not where your undergraduate students are right now. most of them, right? And so it's a challenge to calibrate your expectations and your standards for your students' performance in your class. You know, it's not realistic to expect them to perform at the level that your graduate student peers are performing. And Ben and Alan, I think, have some experiences or some ideas they want to share with us about that experience.
Yeah, I mean, I remember when I first became a TA, I had the hardest professor in my department, and I didn't come as far as South Korea, but I came from the great snow-filled land of Chicago. And when I was at Northern Illinois, the hardest professor in the department said, now, Gross, because everybody got called their last name, and he goes, Gross, I feel bad for your students that you're going to grade. Nobody grades harder than a first-year graduate student. And I'm like, Ross, there's no way. Like, this is going to be fine. And I come back on the first paper and go, they're horrible. The highest one I gave was a 75. And he goes, yeah, I'm giving everyone 15 points on top of whatever you said. It's just... And I went back to my undergraduate mentor, and I'm like, Glenn, like, what's going on here? Like, how do the students get so bad? I'm only 1 year out. And he goes, Gross, look, if you want to write a test to make them fail, you can do that. He goes, but that's not the point of education. You have to realize, where were you your first year? And so I went back and I read my first paper, which I worked very hard on and got an A in the class and on the paper, and I was so excited. And I read it and I said, what did I write? How did I get an A for this? Like, really? But then that reminded me, you know, look, education's a process. And we have to bring ourselves back to, where was I as a freshman? Where was I as a sophomore? Go back and read your papers. See the feedback that you got. And help to remind yourself, okay, what's the point? At the end of this class, what do I want these students to know? Okay, well then at the end of the chapter, what do I want them to learn to get them to that end point? Well then at the end of today's class, what do I want them to know so I can get to the end of the chapter, so I can get to the end of the class? If you can build backwards from there and have that whole game plan to go, at the end of the day, here's what I want them to learn, and here's how each thing, each day builds upon that, that will help to give you realistic expectations for what information they should be able to get back to you, for what information they should be able to explain, for what they should be able to take away from that class, and show that they've learned and are able to apply that later.
Thanks, Ben.
Yeah, that's a very good point, you know. And also think about your, you know, the class that you TA or TF or, you know, the schedule. Because if you teach the materials, it doesn't mean they actually remember it or they actually learn it. I think, you know, a lot of you may have that experience too. So if your class meet every day, that may be a little bit better. You know, they are constantly exposed to the material every day. But if the class meet twice a week or even just once a week, don't assume they would understand and remember what you taught last class. So like, I would suggest every time, you know, I'll ask my students, you know, what did we talk about last class? Just tell me 3 things. You know, so that you can check their understanding, you know. You would know whether they actually know what you have taught. So if they didn't remember it, it may not be their fault, you know. They have other classes too, or the material that you taught were just a little bit too hard for undergrad students. So like, you have to check with them and then also try to revisit some of the material that you taught. And then I will also do assessments with them. So one of the assessments we always do is obviously exams. But I would like, you know, I always like to do formative assessment with my students as well, which means you assess them before you teach the material. So I ask, oh, what do you know about history of tennis, let's say, or what do you know about you know, philosophy in political science or things like that. You know, just ask them about what they know. So if things that they already know, you don't need to teach as in-depth. But if things that you think is easy, but they have no idea or no clue what you talk about, you probably need to, you know, put some time, you know, switch your materials or your calendar and what you teach with them so that they actually learn things that, you know, meet their standard or their expectation or things that, you know, your objective of teaching them. Yeah, so that's something I would suggest you do, the pre-assessment, post-assessment, and then next class, ask him what they have learned last class.
I would also add really quickly, it's important to keep the background and the trajectory of your students in mind whenever you're a TA or a TF. So in my experience, most of the people I teach are freshmen, non-majors, who will very likely not take another class in my field, although it's great when they do, and every now and then somebody's inspired to become a philosophy major after they came in engineering. Right? But at the same time, you want to, I always think, how can I, design my class or execute whatever I'm doing, even as a TA, in such a way that they'll get something out of it. They can say, all right, I learned something about this and it's benefited me. It maybe changed my perspective on things. And, even if I don't take another class in it, I've, gotten something out of the experience.
Thanks, everybody. I'm going to switch up the order of our topics real quickly, just a little bit. Another topic we wanted to address with you really briefly is how to approach balancing your class preparation, all the time it takes to be ready for class every day, with all of your other obligations. You're writing a thesis, you're writing a dissertation, you're publishing articles, you're on the job market if that's where you are. Joey, do you have some words of wisdom for that?
Yeah, absolutely. So I really love teaching, and especially whenever I became an instructor of record here, which was spring 2013, I was really focused on, class prep, and I realized that the amount of time that you can put into class prep can be infinitely long. Because when you're not just preparing what you're going to say to people, you're preparing all kinds of background information, you're getting yourself ready to answer questions and have tough discussions with your students. So making sure that you bracket certain periods of time on certain days to do your prep and say, okay, I've done it and this is it, right, is very important. If you're a TA, it's vital that you be honest with the professor that you're a TA for. The amount of work that you have to do as a TA can vary drastically, in my experience, depending on the professor that you're working under. And of course, it's always going to be a challenge to balance this, but being honest with them about what you're doing. And if you find yourself putting in like way more than 20 hours a week as a TA, you have to remind yourself that you're also a student, right? And that you have to make sure that you're setting aside time for all of your other things, as Shana pointed out, dissertation or thesis, publishing, conferences, and then, full-time coursework, which a lot of you are going to be taking as well. So bracketing particular times for that organization is definitely key.
And just something to add real quick, if you're a TA and you're going over 20 hours constantly, I think that's another time to go back to the instructor of record there and talk with them and say, look, I'm trying to keep up with what you're asking, but it's taking me 30 hours a week. Is there something that I'm missing to be more efficient, or are their expectations overestimating or underestimating the time that should take? And just be willing to have that conversation instead of going on the entire semester doing 30, 40 hours of TA work and not getting then to your work to finish your degree.
If I can add something real quick as well. I completely agree with Joey on setting your schedule. That was what saved my life last semester when I was doing comprehensives, teaching 2 classes and taking 3. It gets really crazy really fast, and absolutely holding yourself to a schedule of this is my prep time, and then when that time's over, I have to move on. I've got other stuff to do. I think that's really important. But additionally, one of the big things that I hold to and that I recommend to any graduate students that I talk to is you have to have time that's for you. You've got to have time that you take off. I take Saturdays off, except for like this Saturday, it's orientation, I'll be here. But I take Saturdays off, and that's my family time, and that's my friend time, and that's my I don't work day. I work pretty much the other 6 days of the week, but that one day is just my day to go do other things. And I think that's kind of a mental health break that you need. So don't be afraid to take that. We do have a lot that we do, and we do have a lot of responsibilities as graduate students and TAs or TFs or whatever your role might be, but you're still human, and you need that time too. So don't be afraid to do that.
I totally agree with all of them talking about the schedule. Make sure you know your schedule. And then one more thing I want to add is, don't try to be perfect in everything. A lot of times, we are graduate students, we want to be good at everything. Of course, we want to do our best in everything that we want to do, but don't try to overdo either one of the aspects, no matter it's research or teaching or classes. You have to know how much you have to do to meet your standard, and then get to a standard, and then get the job done, and then move on to another task. Don't keep, because I've struggled first time I taught some lectures. I remember I preparing until like 2 a.m., and I had to get up 6 a.m. the other day for data collection and research. So I was like, no way, I cannot do this anymore. So I make sure I know what I want to teach students and what I need to accomplish the next day so that I understand when I need to get something done and then move on to the next task. And then if you teach, I would suggest a kids principle. Keep it simple, stupid. So like when you teach, think about one thing or one concept you really want your students to learn. There are so many things in just one theory or one lecture. I can talk forever for like, my research area. But think about as undergrad student, if you can take away one thing from your lecture, you are basically successful. That's something what you want them to know and want them to learn.
Thank you. Very briefly, let's do this. Alan is an international student, and when we put our panel together, he said, please let everybody know I'm an international student. And I'm going to give Alan a couple of minutes to share some words of wisdom from his experience of serving in an instructional role as an international student, some of the barriers that come up, and if you guys have experiences of working with international students in your classes, this is a good time to chime in with that too.
So first of all, how many international students do we have here? Raise your hand. Whoa, there's about 1/3, so like about 100 here. So for me, I did not do my undergrad in this country. So I had no clue the level of education or the education system or the style here. But I had 2 years of my master's degree. Actually, I did it in Missouri, so I have never been to Texas before that, and I got to Texas 2 years ago. I would say first thing, learn the system. Learn from your professors or your fellow students about how undergraduate students' education look like, or how, what you need to do with them, or how you should, what kind of level of material you should teach them so that it meets their standards here. And then I would also suggest always check for understanding in your class. So like everybody, not everybody, but most international students have an accent, which undergrad students may not be familiar with. So make sure every time you teach a class, or even if you're a TA, you communicate with your professor or undergrad students, try to ask whether they understand what you say. Because sometimes I think I speak very clearly, but maybe I'm not, So I will always make sure my students understand what I say and ask them to repeat what I have, what instruction I've given to them. Because in that sense, it's not just they understand what I said, but they have to reframe it, they have to paraphrase, and actually understand which task they have to do it for assignments or exams. So I actually find it helpful sometimes as an international student, because you are always conscious about whether other people understand you, always check for understanding, and I think that's the best way for you to communicate with your students or your professors. And then for the cultural aspect, I would say make sure you have some domestic friends or domestic colleague that you handle with or talk to. I know lots of times it's hard to get out of that comfort zone at first time, but I think in general everybody as a graduate student are friendly here. So try to ask and don't be afraid to ask. And especially if you are coming from a culture that you're not used to ask questions that much. Don't be afraid. This country, people are usually helpful and they would like to help you understand more about what you need to do here.
Thank you, Alan. We appreciate that. To wrap up, we have some kind of big ideas about teaching that we've learned along the way. And I'm going to do a quick plug right here. So all of these fine folks have been or are involved with the Graduate Student Teaching Excellence Program, with which I work. I'm on staff, and I'll be telling you about that program later. But it's a very good resource for learning about these things, developing your teaching skills. And not only that, but getting connected with a group of peers, other graduate students who are really passionate about teaching, as many of you are. And all of these folks at the table today have connected in that way through the Graduate Student Teaching Excellence Program. So I just wanted to throw that out there. So, because, you know. So we want to leave you with some kind of big basic truths about teaching that we've learned through our experiences. And I'll let kind of each of us just go down the line and share those pretty briefly because we're getting close to the end of our slot.
Sure, yeah. So my point in this area was regarding technology use in the classroom. And in GSTEP, you're going to learn all kinds of cool ways that you can implement technology in the classroom if you wish, but also outside of the classroom, right? Using Blackboard and other things of that nature. But I've had a lot of success not allowing technology use on a regular basis in my classroom, and whenever I implemented that policy, whenever I first started teaching, I thought everyone was going to really hate that, and I'm sure some people really do. But at the same time, what really shocked me was that, you know, at various times in office hours or talking with students after class, I've actually had multiple people thank me for establishing that, because it's putting them in an environment where they're kind of liberated temporarily from this constant urge to check email, to text people, or to do whatever they do with their phones, right? To make people more mindful about technology addiction, you know, which I think is an apt phrase, and the amount of time that they put into that rather than just being in the moment.
So a couple of points that I wanted to kind of finalize this with. I've already said one, in that I do think you really need to have a support system, both within the department. I think Alan spoke to that really well. And then also outside, you need those people that aren't here that can kind of understand, or that you can vent to, that are not the people that are so entrenched in this environment. But then the other thing I want to say is that, like Dr. Krutzinger said earlier, teaching can be very rewarding. It can be a very rewarding profession. It's what I do. I taught middle school before I came here. I do this now for 3 years, and I've loved every minute of it. But at the same time, remember that sometimes it's really hard. There are going to be times where lessons don't go well. You walk out feeling like you just failed that class. You walk out, you have feedback sometimes that's not positive. Course evaluations and I don't have a great relationship. Because you tend to read those and you see some really great feedback, and then you've got one person that didn't like something, or and it's really hard to let that stuff go, but you have to. You have to let that go. You have to take those critiques and you have to take that feedback and say, okay, what can I fix about this? And then the rest of it you have to not internalize. So I guess that would be my biggest takeaway that I think I've learned as a teaching fellow here is there are going to be moments when it's hard. There's going to be times when things aren't positive. And hold on to the things that were good, and you've got to let the rest of it go.
For me, I'd say, you know, I always think experiential learning is important. So in learning, we have 3 domains: cognitive, affective, and psychomotor. So I think being, you know, being an instructor is very important to engage students with activities. So I'll try to incorporate some of the activity in your class and discussions, because students learn better by actually doing something than just listening to a lecture. So I would say that's something that, you know, is a big takeaway from me, and most of my students really like having activities in the class. And I was just talking to him about we have, you know, bring break in class, so like, which means in the middle of the class you see like student falling asleep, or, you know, they are tired. You get them up, moving around, have a discussion, or, you know, have some activity for them to do. That actually help them, you know, concentrate and learn better in classroom.
And my big thing is just be true to yourself. You know, I'm not really a suit and tie guy. I'm a punk. And so like every fall I go out and buy new black Chucks, high tops, and that's what I wear when I teach. I still put on the shirt, the tie, but I wear my Chucks. And that's superficial. That really is just on the superficial level. On a deeper level, yeah, we're on a stage, but you know, we're not actors. Unless, do we have any theater people here? You are actors, and so you can fake it. But most of us here, we're not actors, right? We're here to be in academia, and so we're not the performers up there. And students can smell when you're being fake. They can smell a rat out. And so the biggest thing is be true to yourself. And sometimes that does mean you're going to fail. But learn from that failure. Teaching is an art. It's like a good bottle of wine. It has to age to be good. You can't just get it off the shelf right away and have it be like ready to go. And so realize that you're going to go through the highs and lows, but if you stay true to yourself, if you stay true to the goals that you want to bring to your students, those educational experiences, you're going to have those great heights, and you're going to find what works for you. And you're going to develop your own teaching style that's an effective teaching style, because you can't just copy someone else's style. That's not going to work. And so part of this experience is you getting to be in a laboratory and you getting to find out who you are as a teacher so you can connect with students and continue with education.
That's a very fine thought to end on. Thank you so much, Ben. Thank you to all the panelists for sharing your experiences, your sort of pearls of wisdom from the road. I'm going to ask them to stick around for a few minutes as we take one of those brain breaks that Alan mentioned a moment ago. You can stretch your legs. I'll be around, kind of buzzing around for most of the rest of the morning, and I welcome questions from you if you'd like to check in and ask in more detail about any of the things we talked about today. Thank you so much, panelists.
GSTEP.